guest, Kara Loewentheil, JD. Kara is a master certified life coach, founder of the School of New Feminist Thought, host of the internationally top ranked podcast, Unfuck Your Brain, and author. Her first book, Take Back Your Brain, How A Sexist Society Gets in Your Head and How to Get It Out, has been called a galvanizing debut by Publishers Weekly, chosen as a must read by the Next Big Ideas Book Club for May 2024, and praised by New York Times bestselling authors, including Mel Robbins, Elise Loehnen, Dr. Marissa Franco, and Tori Dunlap. Wow. Welcome, Cara. We are so excited to talk with you today.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here.
I mean, what a way for your first book to come on the scene.
Thank you. I know. I'm super excited. The first bestseller list came out this week, and we were the #1 nonfiction bestseller on the USA Today bestseller list. So that is very exciting. And we just got a couple more lists we're waiting for. Thank you.
Incredible.
Okay, so take back your brain, right? How a sexist society gets in your head and how to get out of it. How'd you start writing about this?
I mean, I think that this is sort of the culmination of all of the work that I do. And I started thinking about how society programs women to think about themselves from the psychological point of view when I became a coach. So before becoming a coach, I was a reproductive rights litigator, and then I was an academic. So I've been a professional feminist my whole life, one way or another. But I sort of felt like I had left the world of feminist theory behind when I became a life coach. And I was, working with women using sort of these cognitive tools that are still very much a part of my practice today, are still very important. But after a year or two, I started to feel like something was still missing. And I really realized that those, the core tools that we use in coaching, in, many of the kind of older forms of therapy, at least, were also created by straight white dudes who didn't really think about how like society might program people to think, because they just thought that they were they were sort of the singularity. Like they were just however they thought is how people think. Their experience is everybody's experience. And they didn't really have any awareness of the fact that like women might have a different experience, or people of color, other marginalized people. And so it just became so clear to me that that was really missing from the coaching world in particular. And so I started putting together kind of the feminist theory that I had known in my previous life with these coaching tools, and produce this new form of feminist coaching. And that's really what the book is about. And it's really recognizing that the thoughts you have are not just from your family of origin, and they're not just from, the way your brain evolved. It's not just evolutionary biology and psychology. There's like a third leg to the stool, is how I think about it. And that is, what are the messages you got from society, implicitly or explicitly, about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be your race, what it means to be your religion, what it means to be your body size, or to have your type of brain, like all these different identities. We learn how to think about ourselves based on those identities from society. And then that comes out as our own thoughts, and we don't even recognize it.
It's so interesting because, our kind of what we talk about, it really aligns a lot with what you're speaking to. We went to school to become therapists, and even in, becoming therapists, a lot of our classes, a lot of the things that we were taught was to like neutralize ourselves. And, we kind of had the same thought that we were being taught by these, therapy theories that were created by a lot of white dudes. And so it's
especially in a field that's very female dominated, like therapy, right? Like so many therapists are women, and yet every famous name in the field is men.
Right. It's just like education being mostly women, but then like the college presidents are men, right? I mean, that's so common. Exactly, and that whole idea of neutralizing yourself. Like I actually did a limited podcast with another coach a couple years ago called Outside the White Box, because you get that in coaching too. That's sort of like, you are sort of trying, to become like this white box, right? Like and obviously there's like, you want some of that. Your goal as a therapist or coach is not to come in and just be like, listen, I think your partner's an asshole, and he probably is lying about his ex. Like you're not, or like, here's my trauma with my mother. Like you're not, the goal is obviously not to come in just like we're friends chatting. But even if you could somehow get your mind to be a blank slate, which you can't, like your client or patient can't either. So like they have thoughts about you based on who you are. You have thoughts about them based on who society told you they are. Like there's no way to truly be some kind of blank screen. And it does such a disservice to practitioners, I think, to coaches, to therapists, to whoever, to tell them that's the goal, because that's impossible. And then you have to be in denial when you're not doing it, as opposed to if what we were teaching was like, your goal is to try to be as aware of your own biases and thoughts as possible and try to hold a clean space as much as you can. Like then people could have honest conversations with themselves about how they were doing that.
Absolutely. So, okay, well, part of it was a lot we can talk about this, but one of the things you talk about is how to get out of it, right? So many books now talk about here's the information. Your book talks about how to actually do it and get out of it, which is what we really want, right? We want action. So, what so many women want to know is how can we stop trying to manage other people's opinions of us?
Yes. Yeah. So for sure, that subtitle to the book is really important. It's not just how a sexist society gets in your head, it's how to get it out of your head also. But I think the most important thing to understand about trying to change any thought pattern is that the way we ask ourselves the question, the way we think about it is, right, how can I stop caring what someone else thinks? I want to stop having this thought. But that's not how the brain works. You can't, there's no off button, and we don't have like targeted lobotomies. You can't stop thinking that, right? You have to start thinking something else. And we spin and waste so much brain energy just being like, oh, I wish I could stop this thought, like resisting the thought being there. But it's like having a bee in your house and you're just like, I want this bee to go away. Like the bee it's not going anywhere. That's not how it works. You have to start thinking something else, right? Your brain has neural wiring. You can think of it like a muscle memory or a habit as a metaphor. And you have to build a different pattern, and and you have to practice that pattern enough for it to become your default, because your brain is always going to take the path of least resistance. And if you've been thinking, it does matter what everyone else thinks of me at all times until I die, which is pretty much what society teaches women, like that's a very strong neural network. That's a very strong pattern. And so what I always will say is like, we're not going to stop thinking that, or we're not going to stop caring what other people think. What we're going to do is start caring more what you think about yourself. And that has to happen through literally changing thoughts bit by bit, right? Because I think a lot of advice books and self-help books, they do sort of stop there. They're like, so you need to care more about your own opinion. And everybody's like, yeah, if I knew how to do that, I'd already be doing that. That sounds great. Not against that in principle. Don't know what the fuck, how am I supposed to do that? And so this book is very concrete about teaching you how to come up with new thoughts. I teach a concept called the thought ladder in the book that like shows you how to go from what you believe now to what you want to believe, but more importantly, like what are the little steps in between that you can actually believe? Because a lot of people, even who are more, maybe have done more self-development, have been to therapy, like are kind of more, cognitive change is not a new idea to them. They're still trying to practice like positive thinking and trying to think thoughts they don't believe. And then they're getting no emotional payoff in their body. And then their brain is like, fuck this, I'm not doing this. Like, this isn't doing anything. And then we give up. And so people, they come so close to like the secret of life of being able to change your own thoughts, but then they just walk away because they weren't taught how to do it properly in a way that actually changes your thoughts, rather than just like repeating a thing you don't believe in and being like, okay, well, I don't believe that. So what's next?
I think it also goes so much. This is so much when people want to do like body image stuff, right? Where they're like, oh, stand in the mirror and do positive affirmation. It's like, okay, except for that the entire world is fat phobic. And I can stand in the mirror and I can do positive affirmation, but then I can't go to Target and buy something that fits my body, or I can't sit in an airplane in a comfortable position, right? So even if you sit here and do that and the whole world is telling you why you're wrong, the payoff is not going to work, right? Like it's too much the other way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can actually become pretty impervious to other people's opinions, but you have to you have to earn it. You got to go step by step, right? So the body image chapter of the book opens with me sitting naked in front of a mirror and candlelight doing a like body image exercise that a coach gave me, where I was supposed to be repeating, I'm a beautiful goddess. And like, first of all, I'm Jewish from New York. Like, I'm a beautiful goddess is not, my brain was just like, what the fuck are you talking about? So like that did nothing, right? But that was the moment where I was like, there has to be a different way to do this. Like, this is too far. And the thought that I ended up practicing for like 2 months was, this is a human stomach. I have a human stomach. Like, it is clearly true. I really can't argue with that, right? It is distracting my brain from thinking your stomach is disgusting all the time, right? It is humanizing it to my, like, there are a lot of reasons that thought was a good thought. But that's what we need, is like these tiny baby step thoughts that we can actually believe. And the way you believe a thought is, did anything change for the better in your body? But you have to be realistic. Like I always say, we want a 10% less shitty thought. Like it's not going to look inspiring on Instagram. You're not going to see like a Pinterest board that says, this is a human stomach. Like that's what people want, because we see all this like pop psychology affirmations, know your worth, think you're beautiful, blah, 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 blah. But your brain is like, it's not on board. And so those really little bits. But the positive thing is, and I know you guys know this as therapists, it's like we, overestimate what we want to do in a short period of time and underestimate the power of like small incremental changes over a long period of time. And those small thoughts really can add up to a place where like I live in a bigger body and I really don't think about it that much anymore, even though I don't ever go to Target to buy clothes, although Target probably does sell plus sizes now. But like,
they do, but it's very small section.
I believe you. But I'm just saying, even though I can't shop in most stores and, I do worry about the plane, I am uncomfortable sometimes in restaurant seats, not even just planes. It just doesn't, it's not emotionally traumatic for me anymore. And that's the difference between changing your thoughts. And people sort of think that if you stop, sometimes I think we think that if you stop suffering about something, it means that like you don't care about it for other people, or you don't care about the injustice in the world or whatever. But what fat phobia does when you let it emotionally destroy you is keep you small. I didn't become a coach for a few years because I thought nobody's going to listen to a fat coach. Right. So like changing that perspective for myself and not allowing it to emotionally traumatize me all the time is what has allowed me to show up so much more publicly in this body, hopefully showing other women that like you can be taken seriously in this body. You can impact other people. You can have a public life, so if that's what you want.
Yeah.
So I really push back against the idea that somehow like, it's almost like we're like, well, if I change my thinking so that unjust circumstances don't emotionally destroy me, that's like letting them win somehow, or like not caring. And I'm like, this is the opposite. It's you winning so that you can actually do something in the world and not just, suffer at home alone because society's convinced you don't deserve to be in public.
Yes. Wow. Cara, can you speak to how we as women are socialized to believe that our value depends on other people's evaluation of us? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I sometimes refer to this as like the core wound of patriarchy. It's like the like fundamental thing that we learn is that our value is like the stock market. It like goes up and down depending on what everybody thinks of us at any given time. And for your brain, that doesn't even mean people that like are still alive or even still know you. It's like, what did your third grade bully say? What did your, like you're like having conversations in your head, fighting with people who you haven't spoken to in 20 years who once said something mean about you. That's because our thought pattern is that our worth and value depend on like what everybody else thinks about us. And so I think we're constantly, like bats use echolocation to move around with sound. It's like we're constantly like echolocating our value based on like, what is everybody else thinking? And that's why you get that crazy roller coaster experience of like, you leave the house and you feel good. And then somebody says something rude on the street and now your self-esteem is trashed. And then it like climbs back up a little and then it goes down again. It's because it's like not connected to anything in you. It's like a balloon. You're not holding the string. It's just being buffeted around. And so I think the solution to that is, again, it's like using this very small concrete thought work to actually build a different base for your self-esteem. But again, it's like, you can't go to like, I'm amazing no matter what anyone says. Like your brain is like, fuck you. That's not, I don't think that. It's not going to do anything, right? We're really talking about starting with thoughts like, it's possible that I can have value even if my boss is mad at me, or like whatever the thing is, right? It's like really starting with, I have a very argumentative brain. I was raised by New York Jewish lawyers. I went to law school. Like, I know that you can find like baby step thoughts that your brain really can't argue with. And that's how you start to build the ability to think something else. And then when you've done that a lot, like now when I want to do a new thought, I often can make a bigger leap, but it's because I like learned the skill of doing that. I had to start with like really just, it's possible I'm not the worst person who's ever lived. Like just tiny little steps.
The most basic, reasonable. I mean, you
But
can't
people
argue with
really
that
think that
either.
stuff. It
I
know.
sounds
know.
silly, but like that's what's
No.
in their brains.
But that's the automatic negative thought, right? But
Right.
but when you say it like that, it's like, of course, it's true, right? Like, I'm just saying, like, statistically wise, it is possible I'm not the worst person ever. Of all the
Right.
billions of people,
Right.
it's possible it's someone else.
Yeah, but like sometimes that's where you need to start. Like
Yep.
your brain really, people, part of why I think in the book, before I even get into the brain, I talk about curiosity and self-compassion. It's like, especially for those of us who are um want to, like, we identify as feminists or as strong women, or like we want to believe that we have better thoughts than we really do,
Right.
or we have conflicting thoughts, right? And this is really what I call the brain gap in the book, is like we do have our conscious prefrontal cortex thoughts we learned when we were older about women's empowerment, like for instance, that you don't need to be a size 2 to be attractive, or that you shouldn't need to marry a man to feel validated. It's like we learn those thoughts later on in life, and that's great. But when we were 2, we were watching Disney and learning that you did have to look a certain way to be loved, and that the bad characters were fat and ugly, and that you did have to, it always ended in a marriage, and like that shit's in there too, and it doesn't go away. And so we try to just like desperately convince ourselves that we believe these higher level aspirational thoughts. But that's why we need that sort of, I think the social context really helps women almost like destigmatize and understand why they still have those other thoughts, that it like there's not something wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're a bad feminist, or like not really a strong woman, or not, it's just you've been absorbing this stuff since you were literally a baby, and you've sort of layered thoughts on top like a geological record, and until you kind of decide on purpose, okay, here's what I want to believe, and I'm going to on purpose make this the strongest track. You just got like trains running down both tracks in your head all the time. And that's why I think so many women can identify with that brain gap feeling of like, I feel crazy. Like, I'm like, I know this, but I feel right. I mean, this was me with dating. It's like, is some guy named Chad, whose last name I don't know, actually in charge of my future happiness when he's ghosting me after 2 dates? Like, intellectually, no, I know that that person doesn't even know me and shouldn't be in charge of my self-esteem, but I am like a Pavlov's dog on Tinder, like to see if he texted back. It's like, why is that happening? Because of that gap. And we have to close it ourselves. Like, no amount of being chosen or hitting your goal weight or whatever else is going to close that gap for you.
Yeah. Oh, I
Always,
love that.
it's always a Chad, right?
Always. I often use Brad. I just feel like either of those names.
Yeah,
I have a cousin named Chad, so I feel bad about
I'm
like
sorry.
slandering
Oh,
Chads.
cousin
sorry.
Chad.
I didn't mean my cousin Chad. I meant other Chads.
Different
Cousin
Chads.
Chad, you are okay. All right. That's who now we're talking about. Okay, let's go back a minute.
Yeah.
So how do thoughts drive our behavior?
Yes. So there are a lot of different, as you guys know, of course, like different models out there of how thoughts and feelings and behavior interact. And this makes people very mad sometimes when I say this, but I think you get to choose the one that seems to make sense to you to run with, because lots of scientific theories turn out to be true, and lots of them got revised, and they're all theories and hypotheses. So I, believe in science, but there's what I use is the cognitive behavioral model of your thoughts create your emotions, create your behaviors, because that is the thing that I, through just endless experimentation and repetition, find to be the most true and useful. And the idea is that you have a thought, that thought creates a feeling in your body, and that feeling motivates your actions or your inactions. But even for people who believe, no, it's actually, emotions arise first and then you have a thought about them, the whole cycle still plays out. Like, even if an emotion comes up first, if you then have a thought about the emotion, like, oh, I must be feeling anxious because I'm actually bad at my job and someone's going to find out. Now you have another emotion on top of that. Now you act it out. So, I mean, to my mind, the thought, emotion, behavior kind of cycle works either way, sort of. It's like, no matter what your theory of emotions are, this is happening at some level. And then in the book, I talk about also the concept of returns, which is kind of a modification of something I learned in my coach training, which is just a way of seeing like your behavior doesn't kind of go into a vacuum or disappear. It like continues to compound, and it impacts your life and the kind of outcomes you can create. So just for a super easy example, I decided to write a book. If my thought had been, I can't write a book, that's too hard, and I felt hopeless, and I would then not have written a book, right? My actions would have been to like give up, probably scroll Instagram a bunch, look at other people who publish books and think about how they were so much better and different than me and look for reasons why they were better and different than me. And then the return I create is I make it impossible for myself to write a book, right? But then my brain is like, see, I was right. There's the evidence. Like your brain is part of the sort of use of the concept of returns is it just helps you see how you are often creating what your brain says it's just observing. Right. So like this happens in dating all the time. It's like, well, you know, I coach so many other plus size women, of course, like nobody wants to date women my size. I get rejected, etc. Right. If your thought is no one wants to date women my size, you are like not going to put yourself out there. If you do try a little and you get rejected, you're going to shut down immediately. And then that's it. You're going to do things like not put up accurate pictures because your thought is no one wants you. And then you're like maximizing the chance that you get rejected because you're not showing who, right? So you're going to take all these actions that make it way more likely that you do get rejected. And then your brain is going to say, see, the reason we're single is our body size, as opposed to, well, actually, it's the way you're thinking, feeling, and showing up. So that is kind of the basic premise, but we can reverse engineer that, right? Like to create those outcomes that we do want. For instance, if I want to write a book, then I'm going to need to change my thought that I can't write a book. I'm going to need to practice something I can believe. And going back to our earlier example, maybe I don't yet believe I could write a best-selling book, right? Maybe I can believe something like I know how to put words on paper and that's what writing a book is, right? Or it's possible that I can learn how to write a book. Or I've learned how to do things in the past that I didn't know how. Or I've done things that were hard before. Like what, you know, there's a lot of different directions I can go, but those are going to produce different feelings. And like, for instance, I tend to really like thoughts where I just break things down to like the simplest thing. So I'm like, it's just putting words on paper would be a good thought for me. And then I'm going to feel like, okay, I'm going to feel motivated, or I'm going to feel confident, or I'm going to at least feel like neutral and calm about it, or willing. And then my actions are I'm going to try. And then I'm going to get the like positive version of the cycle where I'm like, hey, I'm writing a book. It's happening. I put the words down. And now I'm able to like feed my belief that I can write a book with the evidence I'm creating for myself.
Yeah.
So it's that piece of like, even people I think who've done some CBT, or my favorite review of the book was like, some of the CBT, basically it was just a funny way of them being like, well, she didn't invent CBT. And I was like, agree. And did not say that I did. Like, hard agree. Did not invent that. Like I cited in the book. I'm not pretending I came up with that. It's just like you can't win. But
you can't, honestly, you can't win.
But that last piece of like not just stopping at the behavior, and like this is what I really gained from my coach training that was so powerful of like, okay, but like how do I then just through sort of confirmation bias continue to create evidence for what I already believe? And this happens in gender's beliefs too. Like I coach all the time women who are, for instance, like, you know, feel conflict. Let's say we get so much social program around mothering, right? About like being a mother, and it's important to be a mother, and it comes naturally and it feels good and it's your job and all this stuff. And so I will have women who are like having this total brain gap of like, you know, my belief before I had children was like, I'm a feminist and it should be equal, blah, blah, and then like all this programming comes up, right? And then they are, because their thought is like, this should feel natural, I should want to do this all the time or whatever, they are then like feeling you know, shame about wanting or needing help, or feeling like they shouldn't, you know, accept support, or like even if the baby's, you know, other parent wants to help, they like feel conflicted about accepting the help. And then but then they're mad about that. And then they're producing more evidence for themselves of like, I'm in this alone. It's only for women. So we recreate some of our own internalized socialization, and then we like replicate those patterns.
Your way of, right, someone said you didn't create CBT, but your way of describing this, I think, is what's important, right? Like it's so relatable, and right, you're talking about a level of like self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. So I just think the way in which you describe it and talk about it is really, really helpful. And one of the things you mentioned, right, is women and their emotions and feeling shame around those emotions.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit, like how society may teach women to avoid their feelings and how to change that, how to embrace them instead?
Yeah. So there's a subsection in the book that's like a short history. Women are hysterical, men are rational, a short history lesson, something like that. Because if you think about it, one of the like primary indicators, I think, of like patriarchal socialization is when women are socialized with this like catch-22 of two stereotypes that don't make any sense together, right? So it's like both women are somehow more inherently emotional and nurturing and like naturally good at that, and your emotions are hysterical and irrational and out of control, which is like, what? Right? So it's like these things don't make any sense together, but that's the socialization we get. And so in this, even though women are also taught that their emotions are like, that's natural and they're good at them, we're also taught that we're irrational, that we're hysterical, that we overreact, we're too sensitive, right? These are all also especially used if we are responding to sexism or to other marginalization, right? And so I think that women get this very conflicting, confusing socialization. And then we end up like in this weird push-pull with our emotions, where sometimes we're like kind of gaslighting ourselves and second guessing ourselves, like, am I being too sensitive? Am I being too emotional? Am I taking things too seriously? But we also are afraid of our emotions, and we sort of get into this trap of like, because women are socialized to believe that you kind of always need someone else's permission to do, think, or feel anything. I think we get into this trap of like fixating on like, are our emotions valid, and running them through 12 other people, and then like thinking that they need to be objectively correct to be allowed, which then makes us like, it's this weird combination where we're like too sure we're right about some things and we're not even willing to have other feelings, and it just is like creates all this chaos, right? Whereas your emotions aren't, to me, I don't use the terms like they're not valid or invalid. That's like a stomach ache isn't valid or invalid. It's just a thing happening in your body. Like, and you can get information from it, or you can change your thought about it or whatever, but it's not, we're not going to have a tribunal decide if it's like legitimate or not, right? But because women are socialized that way, we get all caught up in that. So we're basically like doing everything we can other than just allowing an emotion to sit in our body and like move through us. I do think all humans, especially Americans, have trouble with emotions, but I think women's socialization adds one flavor to it. You know, men's socialization adds a different flavor, which is like, I don't have emotions, only rage. That's
Right.
it. Everything else is just shoved down. So patriarchy is bad for everyone.
Yes.
Everyone.
Everyone.
All right. I know we have to get to BS, but can we ask one final
Yeah,
question? We talked a little bit about positive thinking. So say this, why does positive thinking not work, and what does actually work?
Yeah, I think that's the kind of distinction between positive thinking and what I call using the thought ladder, or a neutral thought, or a baby step thought, or a ladder thought. I use different words. You could call it an incremental thought. But positive thinking is like, often it's a thought someone else gave you. So it's like handed to you, and then it's like a Cinderella shoe. It doesn't fit, right? It's a thought someone else gave you. Or it's just a thought that is looks good on paper, like sounds good, right? But you are not really paying attention to how it feels in your body. So it's not that it's not that positive thoughts aren't allowed. I have a lot of positive thoughts. Like, I'm not saying we should all feel neutral at all times. Like, I'm not teaching a Buddhist monk level of like detachment, right? But it's that the sort of industry of positive thinking of like high vibes only, and like having any negative emotions is like a problem and means you're low on the quantum scale, whatever pseudoscience is happening. I just,
That's how you know we're all from the Northeast.
yeah, we're just like, put away, what are you talking about? Like, I went to a college with actual science. What's happening? And I didn't even do well in science. I mean, I'm not even a scientist. But so that, like, the real problem with affirmations or positive thinking, it's not that those thoughts, if you believe them, can be really powerful, like any positive thought. Like, my belief was I can write a great book. That's an amazing positive thought that I truly believed that one, though, right? It's that people are trying to practice thoughts that they don't actually believe. And the way you can tell if you believe a thought, for me, what I teach is like, you literally say it in your mind, or if you're visual, bring up the image, and then like check in, what does your body feel like? Right? This is why emotions are so crucial. And people who come to me usually want to like, they're like, oh, good, she's going to talk about my thoughts. I'm not going to have any feelings.
Right.
I can just still be a brain in the jar. And I'm always like, it's a little bit of a bait and switch, because you're going to come in because I'm talking a lot about cognitive thoughts, but then it's going to turn out your body is the barometer, the GPS for like, how do these thoughts work? Sometimes a thought that looks good on paper actually makes you feel terrible because you don't believe it, or you have a different association with that word. Like, human minds are they're each like the fractal snowflake. You know, it's like the three words could mean nothing to me or feel terrible to me and feel amazing to you. And no one else can know that for you. So part of what I think is so challenging for people with my work sometimes when they come in is that women are so socialized that like an authority is supposed to tell you what to do. So they're like, they want me to tell them like, oh, here's a good thought for you to think. I'm like, I don't fucking know. You know, I can give you, like in the book, I give you templates. I can give you, you know, there's a skill you can learn that's just sort of like, how do I come up with new thoughts? It's like becoming a dressmaker or something. You can learn certain patterns. How does a sleeve fit together? But I don't know exactly what words you should use. And only you know. And the only way you'll know is by checking in with your body and trusting it, which is exactly what women are socialized to never, ever do. Right? We're like socialized to alienate ourselves from our bodies in all ways. But actually, your body, it's not the source of wisdom in the sense that every gut feeling you have is genius. Like that gets distorted also. But it is the source of wisdom in the sense of like, your body's going to tell you what it thinks about what your brain is saying. And that's really the only thing you can use to figure out what to believe.
Sounds like you like guide women to, you know, get to know themselves, right, on a deeper level. Well, where they might come to you and say like, tell me who I am, where you are saying, I am going to allow you to tell you who you are, right, to like really get to know yourself on the deepest level. So
to have a different relationship with yourself, right?
Yes.
Like your relationship with yourself is the longest one you'll ever have, and you usually give it the least thought.
Yeah.
Oof. Isn't that such a shame?
So, as you know, every time we have a guest on the show, we play a game called Calling Bullshits. So, we're hoping that you could call some bullshit out, something that is maybe to do with the book, to do with your field, anything at all. Call some BS for us, Cara.
Well, I feel like we already called BS on like
I know the whole episode,
the whole thing,
and vibes. But another here, I'll give you another one.
Yes.
This is a perfect example. So, this is a perfect example of why, like, even well-intended, well-meaning advice can backfire if you don't understand socialization. So people are constantly giving women this advice to know their worth and to like negotiate from that place, or like, especially in financial situations, like to know your, but also even dating, whatever, know your worth. This is fucking terrible advice because women don't know that they have any worth. And so when you say that, what they hear is, okay, I need to say I'm worthy. And then I hope this person validates it so I can believe that it's true. And that's not usually what happens, right? So if you like, your worth is essential, it's inherent, it is unchangeable in my view. It doesn't matter if your boss says yes or no to the promotion or the raise, or if that situationship doesn't survive the boundary conversation or the commitment conversation or whatever else, right? But like, knowing your worth is like a beautiful aspirational thought that most women don't believe at all. And so it just ends up completely backfiring, because then they're trying to use it to like set up a confrontation where the other person will, not confrontation like aggressive, but just set up some kind of like system where they're then still looking for the external validation of their worth. And then if they don't get it, feeling terrible or being angry or feeling bad about themselves, all of it. It's like, your worth is an internal job that you have to work on recognizing yourself. And your interactions with other people have nothing to do with your worth. They have to do with those people's thoughts, which you don't control.
All right. We cannot thank you enough for coming on today. Everyone right now, go buy Take Back Your Brain, How a Sexist Society Gets in Your Head and How to Get It Out, Cara's first book. It is incredible. Go check it out now. And while they are booting up their computers to buy your new book, Cara, where else can people find you?
Yes. Buy the book on your phone. You don't need a computer.
Jen will make fun of me. This is how I age myself, that I use a computer for everything.
Also booting up, right? Like what?
Okay, all right.
Like your computer's in the garage.
Right.
Plug it into the modem.
Get on AOL.
Dial up to AOL.
Boot the computer up. That's what gave
that was
you
the
up.
booting
yes,
up.
the booting
I
up.
have a
Gotcha.
sticker on my computer that tells me, Jen will make fun of me, that it tells you how to like copy and paste. That is how bad I am with TikTok.
Listen, my partner brings around his laptop and a mouse separately that he attaches to it.
Me and your partner
I
could hang out
about that all the time. You
That's
can find me at one of the easiest ways is just go to takebackyourbrainbook.com, because that's easy to remember and spell, and all my links are there. You can also find me, at Kara Loewentheil on Instagram, etc. But my last name's a little hard to spell. So takebackyourbrainbook.com is a good one-stop shop.
And it'll be linked in the show notes there too. Yes, and they'll be linked in the show notes today. You can go right there and purchase that amazing book. Thanks for coming on, Cara.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Shrink Chicks.
We'll see you back here next week for another session.
In the meantime, if you want a question answered or a topic discussed, follow us on Instagram at ShrinkChicks. And if you're looking to get connected with a therapist like us to start or continue your therapeutic journey, visit thetherapygroup.com. Just fill out a contact form on our website, and we will personally match you with one of our amazing therapists. And for all of our therapists and group practice owners out there, we also offer group practice consulting.
And if you're looking to support yourself further and support our show, check out our amazing merch options at shrinkchicks.com/merch and our Know Yourself, Grow Yourself journal on Amazon. Also, if you'd be so kind, we'd love a rating, review, and for you to share with a friend or an enemy or a mother-in-law, honestly, whoever needs it, so that we can keep reaching more people on our mission to bring mental health topics to your ears every week.
Thanks for being here with us. And don't forget, to grow yourself, you got to know yourself.